Stay hungry, stay foolish.
So now on the Innovation Show, it's a great pleasure to welcome CXO and Managing Partner at Solutions Unlimited. He is the author of the wonderful book, Start Reverse. Welcome, André Wiringa. Did I pronounce it right?
Yeah, I love the pronunciation, and thanks for having me, Aidan. Much appreciated.
Let's jump into it because we have so much to get through. This is a brilliant book. I love what you've done here. You've combined so many different elements. You've thought deeply about the presentation of the book as well, which we might touch on. But before we go into the book, it'll be great to hear a little bit about your backstory, André.
I think it's relevant to know that my initial background is in hospitality. I did hotel school initially in the Netherlands, combined with an economics bachelor. But I really wanted to do more, let's say, deep dive into hospitality management. So I then went to Florida International University for a hospitality management master's, which gave me an entrance to 4 hotel chains, good experience for hotel openings, which actually was a very steep learning curve. So I actually learned a lot how you should be leading a company, and also a lot how probably you should not or not anymore lead a company. So I was fortunate, and this company I'm now running already for more than 30 years. So hospitality is aging a little bit, but we keep it alive with consistently being involved in new concepts, which I'm sure we'll discuss later.
And you talk about that you noticed a lot of the boardroom promises, a lot of the buzzwords that were used around the boardroom table weren't translating into real life experience.
No, and that's one of the learnings I had so many, when I was in operational jobs, so many buzzwords, like you said, and I think it's called marketing mumbo jumbo, where you see brand promises, which are simply not delivered, first of all, to the customer or to the guest or patient or passenger in life, but also they're not delivered by, for instance, central offices or headquarters, however you want to call them. And if you don't deliver it internally, how can you expect your teams to deliver it to their stakeholders? It's simply, I'd say, a marketing facade, no more than that, in many cases, not all, of course.
You talk about the philosophy of reverse thinking and reverse engineering the process of experience. It'd be great to jump into that a little bit, André.
Yeah, I think with reverse, you start, in the words of Stephen Covey, with the end in mind, whereby instead of what most companies do, you start with the product and then a logistical process, and then you have management and sort of working climate, all influencing staff behavior. Let's say, the end, you have a specific customer or guest experience. I think that's traditional thinking. The vast majority of companies still do that, but you could, and I feel you should, reverse that. Start with what really is your purpose and what identity do you want to bring to life. And if you got those two, you can translate that into what is the experience you want customers or patients or passengers to have, depending on what business you're in. Once you define that experience, you can specifically say, so what does that ask from the teams who create that experience? What kind of behavior or interaction do we want to build? Which can then be translated back very simply and articulately into, so what working climate would facilitate that behavior and what leadership will contribute to that working climate? And only then at the end, you think, okay, and what logistical process do we need? And what does that mean for our offering, our products, our services, our environment? So it's really going away from the traditional thinking.
We're going to jump into each of those separately. But before we do, the book is beautifully designed. And what I love that you did with the book is you thought about your own process and applied it to the book. It'd be great to just touch briefly on the structure of the book and how you did that.
Yeah, thank you for asking. I wanted it to be whole brain. So it's really allowing you to read from a left brain perspective. So it's structured. Every chapter of the journey has a separate color. But if you're right brain, even in that structured approach, the color scheme will actually give individual readers a different experience if you're left brain or right brain Then if you're like more the novel reader, you can reverse the book. You can start with a novel, and within an hour you read about Josh, who is a retailer, who actually, it says it's fictitious, but everything that happens that's described in that story, everything that happens to Josh actually is real experiences from myself working with clients in the field. But I made it a fictitious story, so it becomes like a compelling read. Within the 7 chapters, there are separate sections. So if you're a fast reader, you will intuitively find your own fast way through the 7 chapters. I wanted it to be like a present. So the colors, the graphics, the schemes, they're all designed with great attention for, does this come across like I want to have this book, or I want to read to the next chapter.
I think it's just great that you opened up today talking about you saw brand promises weren't being delivered, and then you developed a framework yourself, but then you applied it to even the book. So you've thought of every touch point, and you do this in the book as well. So we'll jump into that now. First, you talk about the world has shifted. It's no longer about the brands calling the shots. The power has shifted to the customer.
Yeah, definitely. And you could say where Joe Pine, a great friend of mine and a partner, talks a lot about the experience economy, where Joe and I also agree on, is that it's even shifting from a experience economy also towards a purpose society, where Joe in his progression of economic value also says the next level after creating experience is to be transformational. I think that's what a cool brand does, that you're more than just a product provider or a service renderer, that you're able to actually mean more to individuals than just the purchase. And I just read a statistic this morning from Eventbrite in the US that 3 out of 4 millennials would actually rather buy a cool experience than just buy a product, a tangible product. So it's not about things anymore. It's more about what is the experience I'm getting, and if you can make it transformational, I mean, how cool can it be?
Absolutely. I'm coming to you with some brand new stats, Andre, as well. I asked my 2 children, 8 and 4, would they rather more toys or more experiences with the family? And they both, hands down, within seconds, said experience with the family, more experiences, visit Lapland, this kind of stuff. So it's in the blood of the new world. This idea of goods to show ego and to show I have things. People are letting go of that.
So true.
You talk about the experience economy, and that if the bar has been raised, say, for example, it's Netflix, and then an indigenous TV provider comes out with a player that is inferior to Netflix, they actually don't really stand a chance. Their programming is going to want to be really, really good to stand a chance. Once the bar has been raised, that's the new bar.
Yeah, and what I always experience is that with, let's say, clients, partners in the field who do a lot of effort creating new products, developing new technology, rendering new services, whatever you can touch or see is copied within weeks, if not months. Whatever I feel is bloody hard to take away or let be to copy. And that's the power of, if you, what we always say, the shortest sales pitch for reverse is we help close the gap between what a brand promises and what is experienced at point of experience. So closing that gap has everything to do with emotional connection and virtually nothing with physical stuff.
To back that up even further, you talk about this, that if we have a great experience, we might share it with a certain number of people, but if we have a bad experience, we'll share it with up to 15 people. And this is the world we've shifted into, that you will tell people, and you can tell them in the public domain in a way that you can share it on Facebook or whatever platform you wish to, but the world knows about it pretty quickly.
Yeah, and it used to be 4 versus 15, good versus bad experience. You probably add a number of zeros. So it could be the 15 could be now 15,000, or maybe, depending on your followers, 15 million that you're affecting. If you just remember the dentist that was on a flight who was dragged away from the plane, I think it was United, and that cost a damage in reputation of $2 billion in let's say estimate of the value of the company within just a week. That's where you see how massive impactful the experience is these days, and especially if it's shared.
Going back to that boardroom where people delude themselves, there's a certain delusion with our brand is delivering on the promise versus what people actually experience. And you give some statistics on this where there's a massive gulf in companies that claim to give a great experience and customers that actually experience that in that way.
Yeah, that actually we borrowed that from Bain Research, which is, I thought, a fantastic insight, whereby there are statistics varying from 80 to 86% of customers that are willing to pay a higher price for a great experience, whereby if you ask companies that think they deliver a great experience, you get up to 80%. 80% of companies think they deliver a great experience, in which case only 8% of their customers would agree. So there's a huge delivery gap.
You have a bad experience with a brand, and then the brand starts trying to chase after you, and you actually feel somewhat kind of angry against the brand. You're kind of going, well, why didn't you take care of me when you had me? And you give a great analogy that it's almost like you're going out with somebody, you have a partner, and then they break up with you, and then you try and make it up with them, and it's just way too late.
It's like when you unsubscribe from a magazine. It's then when you get suddenly all the attention from the magazine. They want you back. They come with promotions and discounts. And that's exactly when your husband or wife tells you, I want a divorce. And you then start saying, hey, but I love you.
Here's some roses.
That's a bit late, exactly. And that's what I think it's so fundamentally stupid to start telling people are paying for years, they're subscribing for years, they're paying for years, and never get any appreciation until you quit. And then you get all the attention of the world. So and I think customer journey mapping is becoming more and more accepted, in your journey mapping, you should actually think of how do I start spreading delight? How do I start showing that I really care from the start and not when somebody breaks up?
And it's a great lesson even for employees as well. And we'll jump into that in a while, that they are part of the brand experience as well. And they should be appreciated and respected from day one. But firstly, before we go there, the experience in store, if there is a store, the retail outlet, because we've seen a massive disruption in retail, particularly in the States, with closures all over the place. Everybody blames Amazon. I always feel this. It's easy to blame Amazon. But the fact is, and I know Joe Pine, for example, has met many of these companies, or they've ignored the experience economy work that Joe does for years in the USA.
Exactly.
But now they're pointing and going, oh, well, it's because of Amazon. It was them. I mean, they should look in the mirror first, not through the window at Amazon.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with Amazon as a principle. Of course, Amazon is a disruptor. But if you don't see the disruption coming, then you're actually losing the sight on the paradigm that is shifting. For me, it's which I also described in the book. It's a fantastic example. The Swiss watchmaking industry, who ruled the world for decades, who had more than 90% market share. And then when quartz technology was invented, people think it was invented in Japan. It actually was a Swiss inventor who brought it to many Swiss watchmakers. And in a secret convention, they all agreed, let's defy this invention because it only has one moving part that can never be as precise as our watches. And in fact, it was hundreds, if not thousands times more precise. And then the guy actually persisted, and he displayed it in a watchmaking conference or an exhibition, but whatever. Seiko was there, and they saw it, they understood it, and the rest is history. They dropped to about 30% market share at the time, just totally missed the paradigm. And we can see a more recent example in the case of Nokia. When Apple came with the iPhone, the general idea within Nokia senior leadership was, well, what can they do? They only got one device, and we got more than 160 devices. Well, if you put all your R&D in one device, I think in retrospect, we know bloody well what you can do with one device. So in retail is basically the big paradigm shift that is missed by many is that it's not about distribution anymore. It's not about products anymore. Yes, of course, visual merchandising is important, display is important, routing is important, store design, basically how the box looks and feels is important. But the most important is you need to define what is actually the purpose of physical retail. And when working with partners, we sometimes, even on great brand level, I won't mention any names here, but really great global brands, you see that senior leadership has a very either diffused view on what is our purpose of physical retail, or sometimes have no view. It's just they're just operating it. And if you haven't got a purpose, then you can already expect you can bring it to life. And then you get as a consequence that basically in the store, it's all about merchandise. Well, it's not about merchandise anymore. It should be about how do you bring your purpose to life, and how do you what reason do you actually give the customer to go through all the trouble to go to the physical store and actually buy it, or I can actually also buy it when watching the 9 o'clock news, sitting behind my iPad, and get it delivered within the hour, or if they're slow, within a day.
Say it was 20 years ago. Say it was back when Joe, for example, wrote The Experience Economy, or when you started doing your work initially in Europe. You could understand that people could not see it. They couldn't envisage what the experience economy meant. There was no Apple store. There was no Nespresso stores where people could go in and touch it and feel it. But even still, when those game changers exist, those new companies, those experienced retailers exist, people are still asleep at the wheel.
If you've invested tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, in a physical retail structure, in technology like 10 years ago, you need to be a bloody brave hero by saying, well, let's just depreciate all of that and let's start new. I think, honestly, in most cases, it's the best thing to do, but it's bloody hard to get alignment on that in the boardroom. What you do see is that the tankers and speedboats, if you have a tanker, take a big consumer bank, for instance, or a big retailer, a big hospitality chain, or a big airline, what you do see happening is that more and more small initiatives are tested, and then you need to move away from the tanker. So we call it like sort of a speedboat approach, where you can actually test as if you are a startup. Create your own competitor is probably the only way to really survive, because if you keep going where you're going now, especially we talked about retail before, we know what's going to happen.
You can't turn your back on the revenue stream as it is today to take a punt on the future, because the reality is nobody knows quite truly where the future is going, but you can send out some speedboats, as you say, as reconnaissance missions to try and see what's out there.
Yeah, exactly. And where we know it's going, especially in the age of more disruptive technology, the importance of adding connectivity to that is crucial. And not only technological connectivity, but also if you have, for instance, this physical environment, take an airline. It's perfect. For me, it was the first time when Lufthansa, for instance, said the boarding is just with one person at the gate. And you get your express lane, and then you get your economy class, and it's like you do it all yourself. The first time for me it was, I'm not sure if I like this, very impersonal. Then you get through it and you think, this is bloody efficient, saves a lot of time, I like it. But then the Lufthansa way is that it's really, you're just being processed. So the efficiency is something I get used to. But how easy would it be if you then surprise and delight me while you're standing there anyway? So I think that's where the combination, where actually our whole society is heading, that we're getting used to this technology. We're becoming less and less forgiven. So either it works or we disconnect, and we zap. But if it works, that doesn't mean the job is done. We need, on top of it, we call it the delight level, in line with your brand promise.
And am I right, Andre, in saying, right, so people will be wondering, this is all well and good for the big guys, but where this actually sits is it's a marketing thing, because marketing is now more about meaning than ever before in a purpose-driven economy. But marketing supported by CEO level, I mean, this is an organizational boardroom discussion to make this happen.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you want to call it marketing. I mean, it's more being true to self. If you have a brand promise, then you need to bloody live it. And in most cases, it simply doesn't happen. You're setting yourself up for disappointment. If you promise, for instance, let's say a surprise and delight, if that's what some companies are actually advertising with, well, then you raise the bar of expectation. if you create this great campaign and you lure people to come to your retail stores, and then you walk in and nothing happens what is promised. I have a very recent example. It's like a casino company, and I'm not a gambler, but I thought, it looks so cool on TV. And then, okay, I did go into one of the casinos, and then you're almost immediately disappointed because you feel whatever I've seen, whatever I've been promised, it's not going to be delivered. So yes, you're right. In a way, it is marketing, but it's also common sense. Just really be true to self. What you state is something that your employees, your team should experience themselves, so they can pass it on to your audience. Very simple.
Yeah, and maybe we'll talk now about the power of purpose, because authenticity and purpose is very much part of an organizational. It should be on the agenda massively today more than ever.
I think already if you start with the new generations Y and Z, if you don't have a compelling purpose, the good ones will walk on, and you will end up with shift survivors, people who just are working for you because they need money or they want to have a job, but not to contribute. And there are so many studies about what engagement does for you in terms of productivity, in terms of sales. So the purpose of a company starts with finding people who really want to contribute to your business. Gen Y, Gen Z, the three most important things you can deliver is make them feel that they're connected to something that truly matters. Make sure that they're able to contribute and recognize them for their contribution. So if you have no purpose, that's going to be bloody hard.
There's another thing here, Andre, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And you do touch on this in the book, and you do give a framework for people to do this. I really genuinely believe this one. A lot of younger workers, for example, will go, oh, I can't find a company that has a purpose that I align to. But you really do have to start with your own personal purpose.
Sure.
And then align to a company, perhaps. Yeah.
And if you can't find a purpose that fits to you, then I think it's a shame, or you're not looking good enough, because I think it's a good trend. There are more and more companies that have a purpose that at least the purpose you should relate to. If you look at Zappos, for instance, with delivering happiness, if you don't want to contribute to happiness, fine. But look at IKEA, creating a better everyday life for many people. I think, how cool is it? That's something you want to get out of bed for, right? That you can actually create a better everyday life for the many people. Or Coca-Cola. I'm not a big Coke fan from the product, but from a cultural and purpose point of view, refreshing the world or inspiring moments of optimism and happiness. Those are, I'd say, compelling purposes that you want to belong to.
Flipping this around a little bit, the game changers you talk about in the book, they all have some common traits. It'd be great to touch on some of those game changers and why you see them as game changers, and then what lessons we can learn from them.
Yeah, and I speak about different game changers. We have game changers who are like really technology game changers. But if you're looking at also in the traditional, take hospitality or take retail, I think Nokia, I mentioned before, sort of lost the boat later on from a product point of view, but definitely was a game changer. And my partner, Cliff Crosby, headed up Nokia Retail. We set up, flagship stores. And when I say we, it was Cliff with the whole idea for the concept and the product delivery. But it was all about the experience. And our part as Performance Solutions was to bring it to life in a manner that people thought wouldn't be possible. We went to Tverskaya in Moscow, where the first flagship store was opened, where people thought, well, this won't fly. What we now know as the Apple Store experience, Nokia already had it before. It was unbelievably successful. We went to Shanghai and Hong Kong. Hong Kong, 3 years in a row, the best retail experience. Why? Cool stores, but incredibly connected people. And we already, I think it was 2001 or 2002, we designed the first shopper journeys. And for the flagship stores, we actually had guest journeys where we deliberately said from moment to moment, what is the experience we want our guests to have? That was also magic. By calling your shoppers guests, something magical happens because you treat them in a different way.
That element of language becomes really important in an experience economy, doesn't it?
Absolutely. if you look at Citizen M, for instance, from a retail point of view, I think we were involved from the start about 9 years ago, where the purpose of Citizen M is really simple in 2 words: affordable luxury. So it's not about, let's say, all kinds of 5-star frills. It's really about, how do I make what people really want affordable? And affordable luxury is, for instance, free Wi-Fi, is, for instance, having very cool living rooms where you feel like you're in a really stylish environment, but it's very affordable. You take, for instance, your own beer as you do from home. So you walk to the kitchen, you take a beer from the fridge. All you need to do is you need your room key to charge it to your account, but you really do it like you would do at home. And I worked for hotel chains who would say home away from home, but that was boring. This is so alive, and it's really done in a very affordable manner. So that purpose is more than, in most cases, a credo. It's lived in the design, it's lived in the service delivery, it's lived in the let's say the whole proposition that you get as a guest online from moment to moment, which I think is really cool.
And that last mile, right? So the last mile being the service delivery. So the person in a shop, and you talk about this, and I actually was telling somebody today, I was going to talk to you on the show, and I gave this line to him. I said, imagine you walk into a store and you need to buy a shirt, and you see a teller there talking to their workmate, and they look up at you begrudgingly because you're disturbing their chat. You don't want the memory of that shirt from that place, even if it's a great price.
No.
And then you go into a different store and somebody's on the phone and they look up for you, gently put down the phone, and they come over and they apologize and they say, sorry for keeping you waiting. How can I help? Where do you want to buy your goods? That's the difference right there.
There's no rocket science. I have a couple of great examples. Suit Supply. This is like 3 weeks ago. I had a shirt torn at my elbow, and I thought it was a bit annoying because it was my second shirt. So I took that second shirt back to the store, and I thought, is this me? Am I doing something wrong? Should I not move? What is it? Is it the fabric? Is it the series? And then he asked for my email address, looked it up in the system, and said, yeah, I can see you bought it then and then. So here's a new shirt, and we're not sure, but I just want you to feel comfortable. So he was totally empowered, which I think is crucial in the store. No supervisor involved, no store manager. He was empowered to give me a new shirt. I said, well, it's the fact that it's the second shirt that made me come back to the store. So it's the second shirt? Yeah. So when did you buy it? I didn't remember. He couldn't find it in the system. He said, maybe it's a bit longer, but I could give you a second shirt for 50% discount. So I took it. So for 50% of one shirt, I got 2 new shirts, and he got an ambassador for life. And I've already told this example to many. For me, it's not about the freebie. For me, it's about the great example that this guy was actually empowered to make that decision. So I remember this experience. Another experience is when we went with the family to Quebec, or actually we toured Canada. My daughter at the time was 9 years old. I took her into one of the stores of Lush. I'm a great fan of Lush Cosmetics. Incredibly consistent. I've visited at least 80 stores around the world. So here I go with my little one, and I wanted her just to see and smell. And then one of the retail sales associates approached her and said something in English, and I said to her, well, we're from Holland, so we can't really, my daughter can't understand. And she asked me, can you translate? So I said, sure. And then she went on her knees, started to talk to my daughter, and looked at me for translation. And I said, well, don't bother. I'm already a big fan. I'm buying from Lush, but not on this trip. We have 3 weeks ahead of us. And she said with a big smile, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to her. So I had to translate. Well, you can guess what I got for Father's Day when, and this was like almost a year later, I got a present from Lush. And a year later, we were in Wiesbaden, Germany, with one of her girlfriends. And she said, she saw a Lush store in one of the shopping streets, and she dragged her girlfriend in, then 11 years old, and said, hey, maybe you want to buy this for our moms. So they both bought something for Mother's Day. And then I think this is so cool because you see how the retail sales associate in Quebec, knowing that she would not be selling $1, she made, in this case, directly and indirectly 2 fans for probably life. That's what I think it's all about.
Absolutely, it's all about that. And one of my colleagues in work was buying an engagement ring. So high price, high ticket item. Walks into a store. She said the ring she wanted was there, but the sales assistant was exactly like we talked about, talking to a friend, felt interrupted by a client, a possible buyer coming into the store, ignored her, said that they would be available to talk in 20 minutes if she wanted to come back.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I was like, well, my 10 cents here is do not go back because you're always going to remember that attached to the ring. You know, it's like you with the shirt. You wear that shirt. There's a little bit of your memory attached to the experience of buying the shirt and the experience, and that piece is really important.
Absolutely, that's what it's all about. And you could say that 85% is more environment and product technology driven, and it's only 15% people. I disagree. But even if it would only be 50%, then just deliver on the 15% because that's the only part that you cannot copy as a competitor.
And let's jump onto that because people will be going, yeah, but my company culture sucks. It's terrible. Again, it's something you identify in the book. This is what I love about this book. You've thought of every element of the customer experience, including the workplace experience.
Yeah, I think if you keep it simple, I talked about the customer experience before. You need to realize as a provider, no matter what business you're in, that the customer experience needs to equal the coworker experience. And for that purpose, I also think you need to realize that your coworkers are the ones who are closest to your customers. So in the book, I also write about reversing or inverting the organization chart. So if, for instance, and I'm always surprised, if, for instance, you want your floor managers to be coaches, then why do you call them a floor manager? If you want supervisors to be, for instance, coaches, then simply don't call them supervisor, call them a coach. And that's the magic that happens if you're putting your coworkers on one, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So you invert the org chart and your customers are on top, and then the real level internal in the organization is coworkers are closest to the customers, so they're on one. Then automatically your supervisor cannot be supervising anymore. It needs to be probably facilitator or connector or inspirator or Sherpa, whatever you want to call it. So that inverted hierarchy is crucial, that to create a cool culture, I actually need to build a deliberate leadership style that facilitates the culture, that triggers the behavior we want to have to be able to deliver the experience we want our customers to have. And I feel it's no rocket science. And that's what some CEOs we speak to, they see the approach and say that, well, this is bloody simple. And then the first time I heard that, I was, okay, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? But now I come to peace and I think it's a very good thing, because if you have like 9,000 stores, if it's bloody simple, then you have a fighting chance that you can actually roll this out and bring this to life in 40 countries and X thousand stores. If it's complicated already at the design, well, good luck.
Isn't it crazy that it does sound simple to people when they hear it, but still it doesn't get executed? And it's back to that 84% versus the 8%, the gulf between what people think, what companies think they're delivering versus what people are experiencing, the customer is experiencing. But I was thinking there when you were saying about this, the reverse leadership in a way, and that the leader almost becomes this idea of a servant leader, where if it's the business, if it's the experience economy, and if business is now theater, the leader's job becomes to set the stage, not to take it.
Absolutely. And we should do away with ego. And if you talk about, we in the book describe epic leadership as empowering, purpose-driven, inspiring, and coaching has nothing to do with ego. And that's where if you're looking at epic leaders, true epic leaders feel that they gain power by empowering. If you look at traditional managers, they feel like they're giving up on power by empowering. And it's sad in a way, because then you trap yourself in a vicious circle, which is going to be of benefit to nobody. The more your team grows, the more, let's say, the better a leader you are.
I mean, it's like sports, Andre. I see it a lot like sports, where the less ego in a team, the more successful they are, because they're all aligned and they're all working the same level or the same mindset. And when you can align a team of people, no matter whether it's sports, whether it's a non-profit, whether it's a governmental agency, or it's the most commercial driven company in the world, when they're aligned, experience is immense.
Totally. And that's in a store doable if you invert the organization chart. And if you do it basically top down, you feel, and I still come across managers that feel that they're indispensable, that they need to be there. Like the coaches in the field, I like your metaphor. If I'm needed as a coach to consistently tell my team what to do, then I also know what's going to happen if I'm not there. If a store manager feels I need to be there, or a unit manager, I need to be there to put everybody in position and instructing tasks rather than providing inspiration and freedom, then yes, then I actually know what I find. If I take a week off and I come back, and then I can say, you see, I go away for 1 week and see what happens. Well, very sad story, but this can be different. And I always say you get the team that you deserve.
And you got to look in the mirror when that happens. And I realize this myself. I've done this where you become a bottleneck to the team.
Yeah.
But again, going back to the sports analogy, a coach cannot take the field, and you can't keep sending on messages with the water bottle carriers onto the pitch. You need to give a framework. But this is why I love the purpose-driven economy you talk about, because you give the purpose of the team, the values, the ways of working, and then you point them in the right direction, and then you give them a framework in which to work, and then you get out of the way.
Absolutely. I think it starts already from the attraction point. What kind of coworkers are you attracting? If you find people who are deliberately choosing you for the purpose you have as a brand or as an organization, and you cast them for who they are rather than for the experience they have, and then you allow them to be themselves. Actually, you probably tell them you have to be yourself because we hired you for who you are, not for your resume. And then you make sure that you have no managers that get in the way with instructions and with scripting and briefings that make the experience less authentic. Then beauty will happen on an everyday basis. And I'm actually sad to say that I've written in my career 2 meters of training manuals, and this was more than 30 years ago, with all kinds of SOPs. And in retrospect, I'm thinking, what the bleep have I been thinking? Because how on earth can you? We had in one hotel, this was for a Hilton hotel, more than 900 standards just for front office alone. And I was so proud at the time, but now I think, impossible. You're setting up a team for failure because you think you can script all the future behavior. So if the guest says A, then you say B. But what if the guest says B? I'm stuck. So it's more like surprising. If you want people to be surprising, then there's only one way. Don't script it. Don't brief it, because it's per se not surprising anymore.
Yeah. It falls back to this idea of being purpose-driven, or having a direction, a North Star to follow and go, well, what does that say? Because then after that, you make the right decision if you've hired properly. And as you say, birds of a feather flock together. The right people will come together. And that's what you feel. Like I was saying this to somebody recently when they were asking me what I was reading. I was reading your book, and I said, have you ever walked into a coffee shop? You probably have a favorite coffee shop. It's probably not the furniture. It may have a part to do with it. It's probably not entirely the coffee. Yes, it has a part to do with it, but it's the ambience. And what does that come from? It comes from the mix of everything. It's the server, it's the coffee, it's the experience, it's the theater. And that's why you go back to that coffee shop.
Absolutely. I think that's the secret of Starbucks. When Howard Schultz was thinking of, how about I create a cafe where it's all about the experience, and by the way, we're selling coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I've been told it's not the world's best coffee, but they're bloody successful. And I think if you're able to create a cafe where people stand in line for not the greatest coffee, but for a cool experience because you want to belong, I'd say well done, really well done.
Yeah, and we'll talk quickly about, because we're running out of time, designing in reverse and this idea of thinking in 5D.
Thinking reverse is recommending or requiring you to really take a step back from your organization, from your daily context. We do the best designs really away, like the speedboat going away from the tanker. We really want a leadership team to go literally on a journey with us. The best designs we do during leadership journeys, where we go either in forests or beaches. We even did it in bunkers, deliberately away from daily context. And then what you need to do, we call it the 5D approach. It starts with allowing yourself to dream. And that's the first D. And the dreaming of what is a future that we want to create, which helps you to find your true north, like you called it. What is your purpose? What is the identity we want to create? Then the second D would be talking about defining. How do you actually define the journey ahead of you? What would be critical success factors? What KPIs do we want to, for instance, take Net Promoter Score? So what scores do we want to realize and by when? To then, if you got those two, dream and define, you can then design in detail what's going to be, for instance, the customer journey or the employee journey, or ideally both. To then, and that's logical results from the journey, critically be directing the whole process. And directing, not like the autocratic managers, but more the director, as in the meaning of Joe Pine, where you're setting the stage, where you're actually providing freedom to the team to maneuver. And the last bit is the fifth D is really deliver, making sure that you have a team that is empowered to deliver, to truly own the delivery. Because if the team owns the fifth D, deliver, it'll happen. And then your gap between brand promise and delivery is virtually zero.
You give the fantastic quote by Maya Angelou. It'd be great if you would share that with our audience.
It's not about what people say or what they do, but it's how people make you feel. That's what you remember. And I think that quote is crucial. And that's exactly applying to retail and hospitality. If you get into a store, it's not about the product. It's not about the, let's say, the verbal interaction, but how does an interaction make me feel? That is a reason why I would come back to what you said before, the coffee shop, or you probably meant cafe, not our Amsterdam coffee shop, the retail store. But that's the reason why different experience. That's a reason why you would choose yes for one airline and no for the other. When we talk about marketing, you could say that with the traditional approach is that going further than just pushing sales, it's helping people to buy. For that purpose, you create a specific advertising. So I think that's all traditional thinking. The real, and I don't even think we should call it marketing. So reverse thinking for us goes way beyond marketing. And I explained that before. Customering, in the words of Joe Pine, goes even further, as you say. I think that's what experience is all about. What is the experience we want our individual consumers, patients, passengers, customers, guests to have? And if you are able to nail that, then one by one, and that's how I think you build communities, that one by one, people will want to belong to you, not because they have to buy from you. So if you get a competitor, nothing to fear, because you're in their heart. That's the true definition of customering.
Brilliant. We've mentioned Joe Pine a few times in the show. Joe was a guest, obviously, in a show before in the Experience Economy, but you're doing a masterclass with Joe together, and it'd be great to share that with our audience.
Yeah, 26 April, Hoofddorp, Amsterdam, 5 minutes from Schiphol Airport. There are a couple of reasons to come. First of all, content, where we go in more depth on the concept of reverse customering, but also we have a number of guests who are actually applying reverse customering in their industries, in their, I think, best practices that they're happy to share. We'll have a couple of workshops, so it's going to be great fun. So that's today. Having said that, it's also that evening, so straight after that masterclass, you can go to Amsterdam, which is like 15 minutes from here, and we have King's Night, which is a crazy experience. So there will be at least 1 million people in orange on the streets, dancing, drinking, smoking, having fun. So talking about interesting experience, that's actually called the Orange Experience. It's worth Googling it. I think it would be a nice combo package, Aidan.
Lovely. And you've kindly as well offered the audience a promo code, which is in capitals, InnoShow 2018, and they'll receive a 30% discount. I'd love if you'd offer one for our audience for Amsterdam coffee shops as well. André, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Congratulations on the book. It's an absolute fabulous one. Thank you for joining us, André Wiringa.
Thank you, Aidan. Thank you big time.